For centuries, we've pictured peace as a fragile piece of paper, right? A treaty, signed by diplomats, always just one bad day away from being torn up. But what if, and hear me out, what if we've been looking at this completely wrong? What if true lasting peace has literally nothing to do with political miracles and is actually a solvable engineering problem? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a cinematic, civilization-scale blueprint. We are moving way beyond fragile treaties and looking at how we can actually engineer civilizational stability.
Now, this next idea completely flips everything we know. The core premise here is peace is not a treaty. Peace is a systems equilibrium. Just let that sink in for a second. Conflict doesn't just happen because bad actors wake up and choose chaos. The source material argues that conflict is fundamentally triggered by unstable systems. When resources are abundant, when you can actually predict what's going to happen tomorrow, and when systemic volatility is low, the incentives for conflict just naturally dry up.
To really grasp why this matters so much right now, we just need to look at Section 1, the age of instability, from 2020 to 2026. We all just lived through this.
Consider the timeline. It wasn't just one isolated event, was it? It was a rapid-fire, cascading sequence of systemic failures. Think about it. 2021, global supply chains completely snapped. 2022, Europe was hit with a massive energy crisis. 2023, we realized how incredibly fragile our semiconductor networks were. 2024 brought severe maritime instability. And then, by 2025, bam, an AI compute shock. This timeline is literally a map of our global infrastructure collapsing in real time.
And when you zoom in on the micro-level failures behind that timeline, it's honestly staggering. A single stuck ship in the Suez Canal froze 12% of world trade. 12%! Europe's energy crisis literally reshaped global alliances overnight. Disruptions in the Red Sea caused global prices to just spike out of control. We saw single factory outages cause worldwide chip shortages, sending nations into an absolute panic about supply chain collapse. And the sudden explosion of AI inference demand? It doubled data center electricity use, heavily destabilizing our power grids. Every single bullet point here represents a chaotic, non-linear feedback loop that drove global panic.
So what's the grand takeaway from the 2020s? It boils down to this. Humanity is not suffering from ideological conflict, it is suffering from systemic unpredictability. Think about it. When a power grid might fail, or shipping routes suddenly become a gamble, nations get scared. Instability breeds fear. Fear leads to hoarding and protectionism, and that directly leads to escalation and conflict.
Which brings us to a huge paradigm shift in Section 2, redefining global peace. If unpredictability is the disease here, how exactly do we engineer the cure?
Well, let's look at the contrast. Historically, conflict has always been driven by resource scarcity, erratic behavior, and this deeply ingrained fear of systemic collapse. But systemically, peace is the exact opposite. It's driven by engineered stability, abundant resources, and deterministic coordination. Basically, when institutions know for a fact they aren't going to collapse, they don't panic.
And you know what? We actually have historical proof that this works. Look at the European coal and steel community back in 1951. They shared industrial capacity to eliminate the fear of resource shocks. With a massive interconnected US-Canada power grid, which tied nations together through reliable energy flows. How about the global GPS navigation layer? That massively reduced miscalculations and accidents. Even the Artemis Accords today are designed to share lunar infrastructure. The common thread? Shared, predictable infrastructure reduces the incentive to fight. Period. Every peace-enhancing system in human history works by increasing predictability.
But doing this kind of thing piecemeal just isn't enough anymore for the world we live in. We need a fundamental architecture. So let's jump to Section 3, the stability engine. We're going to look at 4 specific primitives designed to stabilize systems at a civilization scale.
Primitive number 1 is predictable compute. This means drift-free, deterministic execution that stays totally stable even under peak load. Remember that AI compute shock in 2025? Modern compute is actually quite noisy and unstable under stress, and that instability infects everything from financial markets to the power grid. But when compute becomes mathematically predictable across time and space, AI load spikes stop taking down national infrastructure. If predictions don't drift, institutions don't panic.
The second primitive is fractal energy geometry. It's a highly scalable model that multiplies solar capture and completely eliminates intermittence. And it works everywhere: Earth, the Moon, Mars, in orbit. Think back to those European energy shocks. When energy is scarce and intermittent, nations fight over it. This geometric model replaces scarcity with absolute abundance, permanently collapsing the resource scarcity incentives that have fueled wars for millennia.
All right, the third primitive is deterministic scaling. This guarantees that a system can grow without those nightmare cascading failures, runaway feedback loops, or totally unpredictable load spikes. Most systems, like our global supply chains during the pandemic, they collapse because the way they scale is essentially chaotic. But with deterministic scaling, institutions can finally coordinate globally without the constant looming fear of logistics networks just imploding under stress.
And that brings us to the fourth primitive, which honestly is probably the most groundbreaking, the Civilization Level Stability Index. For the absolute first time in human history, we have a measurable, computable definition of peace. It's a hard metric, ranging from 0 to 1.0, that defines peace through mathematical system equilibrium.
And the magic number? The crucial threshold here is 0.99. The simulation data shows that the moment stability hits this exact mark, something incredible happens. Volatility completely collapses, fear evaporates, and global cooperation goes from being this super risky political gamble to just the entirely rational, logical default.
It all builds into this incredibly elegant concept called the formal peace equation. Let's walk through it. Step 1. Stability increases across your energy, compute, and logistics. Because of that, step 2, fear decreases. Naturally, when fear vanishes, step 3 happens. Conflict incentives collapse. Why fight for resources you already know you have reliable access to? And finally, step 4, cooperation becomes rational. Engineered stability completely neutralizes geopolitical fear. It's just brilliant.
Now, to prove this isn't just a bunch of nice-sounding theory, the source material details an awe-inspiring test. Let's look at Section 4, Simulating a Civilization.
They went ahead and modeled 4 radically different regions: Earth, an orbital fleet, the Moon, and Mars. The timeline to reach a Type 1 civilization, which basically means a state of zero collapse behavior and totally predictable energy abundance, is fascinating. Earth achieves it at year 0, the fleet hits it by year 3, the Moon by year 8, and Mars by year 17. This simulation provides rigorous, hard data, proving that reaching civilization scale stability is a deterministic, solvable engineering problem.
So, the really crucial takeaway from all that interplanetary data is this. If 4 radically different, incredibly hostile environments can converge to perfect stability, then so can 4 nations, 4 regions, or 4 economic blocks right here on Earth. This architecture actually proves we can unify fractured nations simply by fixing the underlying systems they rely on.
Which leads us to our final act, Section 5, the inevitable peace. What does a modern stability-first civilization actually look like?
Well, it looks exactly like this. We are talking about a world governed by predictable energy and compute, predictable logistics, mobility, and manufacturing, even predictable interplanetary expansion. This architecture produces incredibly low systemic volatility. And because you have that massive capability and resilience, you get extraordinarily high global cooperation. Peace just becomes the default state of human existence. It's not the exception anymore.
And that brings us to the ultimate thesis of our explainer today. Peace is not fragile. Peace is not accidental. Peace is a system, and systems can be built. It is a structural inevitability that we actually have the power to engineer today. We do not have to be victims to the chaos of unpredictable systems.
So, I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to chew on. Are we ready to build a world where peace is an engineered inevitability rather than just a fragile hope? The blueprint is right in front of us. The math works. The technology is coming into focus. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, keep examining the systems around you, and I'll catch you next time.